What's it like policing in the Met?
Constant and never-ending is how I would describe it. It's very fast-paced, high pressure, and they do this on a daily basis without a blink of an eye, and then they go from that to the shoplifter, and just before that they've gone to a child who's died. I've literally done that. I've had a 4-year-old who somehow had a heart attack and died, and I've sat in hospital with that kid. And then straight after that, I've gone to a neighbourhood dispute. Originally, he was just talking to me about what happened in custody and asking me about my day. Throughout the whole time, he was looking back on it again, he was asking me to go out for a drink with him within a week of me speaking to this guy.
Just talk to me about the context about those comments what were made, in particular around Islam and Muslims.
There's a lot more to this than what was seen on TV. That's not all that happened at the pub. He also asked me about the role of women in the police, and he asked me about what do I think of different ethnicities joining the police, including Muslims. I find it rather ironic that wasn't included in the broadcast, because my answers to that were obviously not to what he wanted to hear. What broke my heart, and what really broke my heart, was when they put on that, was it 10-second clip of the officer in the custody suite putting his arm around the detainee? I can't tell you how many times I've done that.
Martin, what final message would you have to the BBC? The BBC Panorama documentary, where they went into Charring Cross and they recorded secret filmings. As a result of that, there was a lot of content filmed and officers saying things and officers doing things which cast the force in a certain light. Today, I'm actually joined by one of the officers who were dismissed as a result of that Panorama documentary. PC Martin Borg. Now, Martin, I appreciate you don't want your face out there. We did have a discussion prior to us going live, in the sense of you do have your reasons for that, some technical, some personal. I completely respect that. So, Martin, this is your time really to tell your side of the story. We know what the BBC put forward. People have their own opinions about the BBC anyway. But I watched that documentary and I found it quite hard hitting. And obviously, I've been on both sides of the fence in relation to, I used to be a Bobby myself, did just under 10 years, and now I'm a civilian. So I can look at that documentary with my eyes wide open, so to speak. So tell me about you. First, tell me about your service in the Met.
So I joined the Met in 2019. I was coming up to 6 years before I got dismissed. I spent, straight out of my street duties, I went to a VSU. It's like a violence suppression unit. It's sort of proactive specialist unit. And I was there for about 3 months because it was new and it needed bodies to bolster it, basically. And then from there, I went straight to response. And I sat on response as a frontline officer for the rest of my tenure. There's not much more to say in terms of my service. That's practically it. Obviously, I've done the usual life-saving, the usual difficult jobs, etc. But that's another story.
Well, Martin, let's not just skirt over that, because, you've been painted in a particular light in relation to this documentary. And one thing what I always say is, when we see edited footage or clip footage circling around social media of officers maybe saying something or doing something, acting in a way which in isolation looks bad, I always want to put forward the case of what you don't see all the great work officers do. So you mentioned now about life-saving stuff. So have you got any specific examples of good work, what you've done? Have you ever won any awards or, any commendations for your time as an officer?
Quite a lot, actually. One of my most rewarding ones, which either former or current colleagues would probably understand, this is not as exciting as the usual stuff, but feels hard, so to speak. It's where we did me and a colleague did an almost Sherlock Holmes level investigation into a guy who'd gone missing, and then we very quickly realized that he was on his way to kill himself. To cut a very long story short, through a lot of hard work from us, we got him at the very last minute. And this guy, sorry for the wording, but the shock of it, he was sitting there with a pint of milk, a Stanley blade, and a suicide letter that he just finished writing the ink on the bottom of it. And the plan, I think it was about 50 paracetamol. And the plan was to take the paracetamol to dull his pain, and then to drink the milk to keep it down, and then to split his wrists apart. And we were about 30 seconds to a minute away from him beginning the process of taking the milk. So he'd already taken the pills.
So this is someone who'd really thought about this. He probably researched it. They'd probably been on some dark forums on the internet.
He's an army lieutenant. He was an army lieutenant. I won't go into more detail on that, obviously. I don't want to name him. But he was an army lieutenant later on in life, I would say. Army lieutenant. And he knew exactly how to get rid of himself. And the reasons why he was doing it was effectively felt he failed his family in terms of finances and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So this wasn't your usual in the police. We all know that there are people that would regularly turn up to a bridge and then phone 999 and say, "Hey, I'm on a bridge, come get me."
Yeah.
And they do it repeatedly and over again. This guy wasn't one of those people. This guy was adamant and was going to kill himself. And if it weren't for my action specifically and my colleague on that day, he would be dead. That's one. What other ones have I had? I've given CPR countless occasions. I don't know how many people I've saved with that.
And I've only had to do. Sorry to interrupt, Martin. I've only had to do CPR once, and it was fucking horrible, needing to do it.
Yeah, it's scary, isn't it?
It's. I hope people never have to do it because it's not nice at all. The feel of the ribs cracking.
Yeah, that's the worst.
The chaos around you as well. What's happening? So the fact that you've done it multiple times. What's it like policing in the Met? Because the Met obviously is busy, it's huge, there's a big demographic of different people. What's it like on the front line of London?
Constant and never ending is how I would describe it. I mean, like I said, I don't have the experience of working in the counties. My own experience of the counties is talking to officers from there. And a lot of them tell me that what we do in our area, I was Westminster, what we do in our area in a day, they might do in a week. Yeah. It's very fast paced. It's high pressure. You can't just go to a job and spend 5 hours at the same job. You know, as much as you'd want to sit there and have tea with Mrs. Miggins, you know, and do that sort of old fashioned community policing that we kind of joined the job for, really. You're kind of under pressure to get in there. Does it require a report? Does it not? Is an arrest needed? Is it not? What paperwork do we need to do? Now we're going to the next one. You know, it's very fast paced. You don't have time to sit there and really think about it a lot. I think that's probably something that counties officers, obviously not all counties officers, but a lot of counties officers can do. They can take the time to sit there and talk to the public and just be that shoulder to cry on, which sometimes people need.
So basically, Martin, from the moment you land on shift, you are non-stop.
Once you get in the car, you're on. That's it.
What kind of impact does that have on an officer on that front line who's essentially running in the red constantly? The adrenaline is constantly going. They're needing to make those split-second decisions. Because from my experience, I worked in a very busy area. I never say where I worked, but I worked in a very busy area. And it could be you go to perhaps a sudden death in one instance, then you're looking for a missing child, then you're fighting with somebody, then you're speaking to someone who's having a mental health crisis, then you're locking up a shoplifter. It can, and then it could be a myriad of different things. That adrenaline, that burnout, that constant stress and pressure, it can really wear on officers. So just from your own perspective, Martin, how did you find working on that front line after doing it for so many years?
Tiring. Mentally draining, I would say. I mean, as you was alluding to there were times where I've gone to a stabbing and then arrested a shoplifter 2 hours later, to give you an idea. You know, I've gone to a sudden death and I've then gone to a person who wants to report their neighbour's pot's been smashed. Yeah. Like within an hour. Do you see what I mean? So it's like you don't have the time to process it. You kind of it's kind of sink or swim. A lot of people that they can't hack it and they will leave response and go to other places, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Like it's not to denigrate them, but it's difficult. It's not easy. I've got PTSD from numerous incidents.
Yeah.
So it's actually flared back up now after all this, probably from the stress, I would imagine. But yeah, it takes its toll, and it's tiring. I used to take annual leave, like just to do nothing at home.
Yeah.
So a lot of my annual leave, a lot of my annual leave was literally just me doing nothing at home on purpose, so that way I can actually, I don't know, think about things and introspect a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's hard.
I used to. There was some times where I would come in from a shift, either normally like a late shift or a night shift, like a weekend night shift, where it'd just be non-stop. And my girlfriend would say, "What have you been to today? How's work?" And I'd literally sit there and go, "I can't remember what I've been to. I can maybe tell you about one incident I did. I think I went to this," because it all blends together, it all mashes together. So when it comes to response, what's the morale like? What are the burnout levels of the officers like? And is there enough cops to meet demand? That's also a big question.
I mean, I'm stifling a laugh at thinking what I'm going to say to you because it's
Mention
awful.
the word morale.
Yeah, I mean, the beatings will continue until morale improves, kind of thing.
Yeah, I've heard
Before
that.
this
I like that.
whole Charing Cross stuff,
Yeah.
it had sunk to the lowest I'd seen it in my time, and in a lot of the sort of old sweats were saying the same thing. I don't know if you know about it, but there was a big thing in the Met around moving response officers to what they're calling VCT. Is it VCT? I think it's VCT, where it's basically doing the paperwork. Do you know when you get crimes sent in through via email or call, and then it gets allocated to an officer? Well, in the Met, they've changed it so that instead of it going to response, it goes to this specialist unit, and they forced moved a lot of officers from response over there, and told them that you have no chance of going back to response. You have to reapply for your job in response if you want to try and go back after a year, and there's no guarantee whatsoever of you going back to the same team. Now, I don't know if you've worked on response. There's a lot of officers in response who all they want to do is drive on blue lights, go to the most awful things known to man, and come out the other end with a smile. And that's all they want to do. That's what they live for. That, like they get kicks out of that. In a good way. I mean that in a good way, as in you go into some of the most horrific stuff. And you want to do that to help the public and to be there
Some
for people.
want to be on the absolute knife edge of policing, don't they?
Exactly.
Like they don't want to be in a slow road. They want to be in fast pace. They want to go to the crazy jobs, the crazy incidents. Some people love that adrenaline surge constantly.
Yeah.
And
so imagine putting someone like that
has
onto...
a mentality on it. Response definitely has a very specific mentality to do it for long term anyway. But yeah, so you were saying, imagine putting somebody like that on a much slower pace. I imagine he'd be like, I imagine they'd go crazy with that.
That's what was happening. That's exactly what happened. We had officers who were leaving for other forces, to give you an idea of how bad it was.
Yeah.
So morale had sunk unbelievably low. Our team's strengths were awful. I can't go into details because now people know where I work. I can't go into details on numbers. But let's just say that it was awful and would be shocking to the public. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, not just specifically talk about the Met Police. I mean, I'm doing research for my second book now called The System's Fucked. And what I did with that was I've spoken to a lot of police officers, a lot of dispatchers, and I remember going on a podcast and I said, how many officers do you think parade? So I gave like a demographic of people, maybe 300,000. I said, how many police officers do you think are there? And every answer they gave, it was less than that. So I do think people will be very frightened and quite shocked to imagine actually how many cops are out there at any one time dealing with things. And then, like you said, someone rings up and says, my neighbour smashed my pots. It's just not a priority. It obviously is the priority to the person because it's happening to them, but as a resource perspective, it's not. Just with you saying that officers are so burnt out and stressed, it's no wonder why officers can sometimes come across as maybe a bit rude or a bit crass because it's a survival mechanism because of how burnt out you are. And two, when it comes to empathy burnout, you cannot physically give all of your attention and empathy to every person you deal with. And you would like to, because that's what you join the job for, but just realistically, mental health wise, practicality, you can't give empathy to somebody if you've got literally none left to give. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. But so Right, what I want to do now is I want to talk about this BBC Panorama documentary. So, when did you meet this journalist, this Rory? Really sorry to interrupt. If you enjoy this kind of content and you want to support me and you want to see these videos before they go out anywhere else in the world, then why not become a Patreon? It costs you the price of a coffee a month. Simply scan this QR code here or click the link in the description. Support means the world. Thank you.
I believe it was either end of September, or it was around about August, September of last year is when I met him. Do you want me to go around how I met him?
Yeah, you can talk to me about how you met him and also how did he present? What
Yeah, no problem.
What was he like?
So I smoke. I'm a vapor. And I would go into the yard at Charring Cross to vape in my off time when I can, usually waiting for my driver. And I noticed that there was this DDO, which is who this reporter is, sort of hanging around in the yard quite a lot. He's trying to talk to people. I don't mean like in a way that was very obviously reporting, trying to talk to people. He was simply standing by the smoking area, hanging out, for want of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd noticed that other people weren't engaging with him. They weren't interested in speaking with him. I think that's because he looks quite young, in my opinion. And he seemed like a bit of a dodo, for want of a better word. I think that was his persona. He was putting that on, but I didn't know that.
When you say a bit of a dodo, how do you mean?
Not very intelligent, for want of a better word, or someone who would go along with things, I guess would be another way to say it. Like if I say to him, do you think the sky is blue? He would go, yeah, I think the sky's blue. I'll go, no, I don't think so. I think it's red. Oh, right, it's red. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of that kind of personality. Because looking back on it, he was obviously putting that on because that's useful to pull someone into you.
Yeah, very agreeable.
So I started to speak to him in the here and there when I was going down for a smoke. He was there regularly. I don't know how much breaks they get in custody, but clearly more than us. And he would originally he was just talking to me about what happened in custody and asking me about my day, which I would tell him about my day. Nothing complicated or unusual about that. One day he tells me that he was looking to apply to be a PC. So I say, all right. And he asked me, like, what's it like to be a PC? I tell him everything. I don't hide anything about it. We talk about sudden deaths, assault on police, all of that sort of stuff. And that's basically how I got to know him. And it happened over the course of 2 or 3 months. So I would go into the yard. He'll be there. Oh, Martin, how you doing? Yeah, all right, Rory. And we'll have a chat. And then we'll both go about our business 10, 20 minutes later. Throughout the whole time, he was looking back on it again, he was asking me to go out for a drink with him practically the entire time, within a week of me speaking to this guy. I might come out for a drink. No, I don't want to go out for a drink. Like, I'm not a sort of person to go out drinking really at work, oddly enough, considering what happened. I usually go out when it's something like large on the team. I've got another colleague who sadly lost his wife and he's really struggling. I used to go out for a drink with him. So yeah, it's quite rare for me to go out for a drink. And I always said no until that one time. And here we are. But that's the story of how I met him. There's nothing more to it than that. It really is just go down in the yard to smoke, and this guy happens to almost always be there. Really.
Okay, fair enough. So just moving on then to when you went to the pub, you made some comments which have been highlighted in the documentary. Quite a few of them in relation to Islam, to Muslims. Just talk to me about the context about those comments, what were made in particular around Islam and Muslims.
So the first thing to say is this is quite a long response because there's a lot more to this than what was seen on TV.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more. So the context of this is the day before that happened, I had been assaulted in custody by what I would describe as a literal terrorist. I mean, we was reported to SO15. So he was a terrorist, and he's in prison for 7 years right now. One of those offences is assaulting me, another one is assaulting a colleague, and some other offences. And the angle of what was going on with the pub was that I hadn't. I finished very late that day, and I come into work the next day for an early turn and just kind of got on with it. I hadn't really processed what was going on with me at that time. I'd been, by the way, just to give again more context, I've been spat at numerous times in my career. This guy gobbed at me again this time. The last time this happened, I ended up having a 4-month wait for the hospital to come back because a guy spat at me in the eye whilst he had hepatitis B, I believe it was. It was hepatitis something or other. And the worry was that because it was via the eye, that it could have infected me. So it was a big, and obviously I've got a daughter. I couldn't kiss my daughter. I couldn't do anything. So it was a rather terrifying time. So anyway, so I hadn't sort of processed all this. And then this Rory, this reporter, had somehow, I think he'd found out about it from someone in custody or overheard something somewhere. And he'd come up to me and said to me, oh, Martin, like I heard this happened with a terrorist in custody yesterday. And I was like, well, yeah. Oh, let me know what happened. And I told him what happened. And he said, all right, why didn't you come out for a drink with me? I said, oh, no, I'm not going to come out for a drink. Like, I'm busy. I'm doing my early turn. I said, oh, but you come out later. I'll buy you a pint. Like, you can de-stress a bit. Take it easy. And that was his word. You take it easy. I said, all right, I'll think about it. Come towards the end of the shift, he's out in the yard again. He goes, Martin, oh, yeah. Do you want to come out for a drink? Come, we'll go for a quick one. So I said, all right, fuck it. You're going to buy me a drink. I'll go out for a quick one then. You know what I mean? I thought maybe this could be a moment for me to actually de-stress and take it easy for once. So off I went. On the way there, he's saying, like, oh, when we get, like, let me know, talk to me about what happened with this guy. Obviously he's assaulted you and all the rest of it. Was he like an extremist? And I was like, well, yeah, it was an extremist. We reported him to SO15 as a terrorist because he was saying words to the effect of, and again, sorry for anyone who's sensitive to this sort of stuff, but he was saying things like, I'm going to come and rape your kids. I'm going to stab you outside the police station. I'm going to blow myself up. I'm going to take people with me. Fuck the UK and all this other stuff that was very terroristic in nature. So we went to the pub, and then what happens at the pub happens. That's not all that happened at the pub. He also asked me about the role of women in the police, and he asked me about what do I think of different ethnicities joining the police, including Muslims. I find it rather ironic that wasn't included in the broadcast, because my answers to that were obviously not to what he wanted to hear. So the long and the short of it is that what I said at the pub is all in relation to that. And I've explained it quite extensively in my defense when I went for my hearing about that. My problem was that I didn't know I was being broadcast to the entire country, and therefore I wasn't explicit in my language. I should have been more explicit. But again, in my own defense, I don't think it's reasonable to expect someone to think that they're being broadcast to literally the entire country on a BBC channel.
I mean, one argument against that would be a police officer needs to be professional inside work as well as outside of work. But I think there's got to be a bit of nuance to that, in the sense of people are allowed to let off steam. Police officers are not robots. If they're in a trusted environment with a colleague and they have asked them about a certain incident and they express something and go, well, this person, I thought he was a piece of shit. Well, you've asked them their opinion, and they believe it's a safe environment with trusted colleagues to share that opinion. Now, there are obviously other people in that documentary who did say, in my opinion, quite vile things. Like there was someone who said we need to, I think it was castrate people and let them bleed out and stuff. Now,
that was disgusting.
Yeah, even without the added context, that's a bit far. But in relation to you saying the Islam's a serious problem, Muslims haters, you were specifically referring to this particular person who was a reported terrorist and who you'd had countless issues with the day before, and obviously given the things what they said. And it was interesting that you mentioned then that he also asked you other questions to do with women in the police and should we be able to recruit people from different ethnic backgrounds. You were quite complimentary of those, and they didn't end up in the footage because, in my opinion, that wouldn't fit the potential narrative that the BBC were trying to put forward. So what you're saying is those comments were made completely out of context and broadcast completely out of context. And when I watched the Panorama documentary back in order to prepare for our discussion, upon seeing that, I think they brought in an ex-acting chief constable who referred to you as a bigot, as a racist. Now, I can see why someone would say that in isolation, which is, like I said, why I wanted to give you the opportunity to add more further context. And I think anybody who knows how journalism works knows that the BBC, or not just the BBC, but news outlets in general, they want to make the most incendiary, outrageous footage possible because that creates the emotion, that gets the attention, that gets the clicks. So it's quite natural they're not going to include things which defend you, and instead they're going to clip you out of context, which is something I often speak about. You mentioned as well a custody sergeant stamping on someone's foot, and you joked about it in the pub. So just give us a bit more context about that, Martin.
So with that, I think that's where I went wrong, and if I'm being honest. So what happened with that was I found the whole thing quite relieving to say and to get out. And I thought the whole thing was funny, but for not the reasons that people thought I thought it was funny. So I thought the whole thing was funny because it was ridiculous. The entire situation was ridiculous. You have a guy in full restraint on the floor, surrounded by 4 cops, yet he's still attempting to kick a sergeant in the leg. It's stupid and ridiculous, and frankly funny, because that's how stupid it is. It's funny because it's stupid.
Hi, me again. If you're interested in the emergency services and the police and you want to know exactly what happens behind the scenes, the things what they don't want you to know about, then I wrote this book here. It's called The Job's Fucked. People say it's really funny. People say they really enjoy it. It really opens a lot of people's eyes about what actually happens in the police, the things what the organisations and the things the media will never report on. You can order yourself a signed copy now from our website by clicking the link in the description, or you can grab yourself a completely free sample of it by scanning the QR code on screen or by clicking the link in the description. Back to the video. Yeah, and just on that, Martin, like I remember being asked on a show once, how many people does it take to restrain somebody? And it was like it's completely subjective. You might get a 6'5", built like a brick shithouse person able to be restrained quite effectively by 4 officers. Then equally, I've dealt with somebody who was 50, 60 kilos wet through, and it took 9 or 10 of us because he was very intoxicated. He had acute behavioral disorder, delirium, excited delirium. He had ABD. So we can look at that footage and we can go, that's excessive. Whereas if you are in that environment and you've had to do restraints on people before, even someone who may present as, you know, for because of their weight, etc., quite able to be overpowered by multiple people, they can still be quite horrendous to deal with, and kicking out, etc. So just so you say that you found it funny in relation to not what the sergeant did, but in relation to the actions of the suspect, the detainee, that even though they were restrained, they were still trying to fight and kick
Yeah, the
out.
situation was stupid. Yeah.
So what do you think about the sergeant stamping on his leg then when he was in the restraint?
Well, it's for him to justify ultimately. As far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned, he kicked out at him and he stepped down on his leg to stop him kicking out at him. That's what I saw.
And then as such that then caused the injury which we mentioned about.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's for the sergeant to justify his use of force. I can only explain whether what I saw would have merited me going to DPS or PSD in counties to report him as using unreasonable use of force. And what I saw, in my opinion, wasn't unreasonable.
It's interesting with that because the journalists then decide if they believe that it was wrong what they saw, the correct procedure to go to would have been to report it to professional standards. But instead, what they did
Absolutely.
was they then looked up the footage and then used that footage as part of the documentary. In my opinion, they had no right to even a journalistic sense to be able to go through those recordings to find that. If anything, it should have been they reported it to professional standards if they genuinely cared.
Jay,
So
what if I told you that if that sergeant was on his own in the cell with that prisoner and he beat the living daylights out of that prisoner, and this DTO found out about it and then sat on it for 6 months while that sergeant is potentially doing serious actual harm to detainees in the cells? I mean, what's the moral compass on that?
well, exactly. There isn't really one, is there? You can't say that in one sense it's moral, the other sense it's not. Essentially, what you're saying is this person believes that someone in a point of authority is causing harm to people who they are in a position, to take care of, and they're abusing that power. What you then do with that information is you have 3 choices really. You either can ignore it, you can then report it, or you can do what the journalist did and they can not report it, take the footage for themselves, and then use it as an expose further on down the line where that sergeant could potentially harm more people and they've not acted on it. So I think it's quite morally inept, the actions, what the journalist did in relation to that. But Martin, just going back to the journalist in the pub, what kind of questions were being asked? Was it like normal conversation, or did you find that it was quite leading and trying to get you to say certain things?
In hindsight, it was absolutely leading. Absolutely, it was the questions that he was like. What I recall him asking me was things like, which minority group do you think is worse to deal with? I mean, that's a loaded question. I mean, if I answered white people, I'm a racist because I'm going to get racist against white people. If I answered any race whatsoever or any ethnic minority group of any kind whatsoever, well, you are immediately racist.
Funny
Right?
enough, Martin, I think saying with the current political landscape, I think saying white people probably would have been okay.
I mean, Jay, you said it,
From
mate,
what we
not
see
me.
so
So,
far.
but yeah, like, I mean, yeah, that's the country we're in at the moment.
If you'd have
But
said straight white men, they'd have probably give you a fucking medal.
wouldn't be
Because you can't be
surprised, mate.
racist to white people and all men are bastards and
Yeah,
all that lot.
yeah. The questions he was asking was questions like that, where there's no way
Mhm.
out. And obviously,
Yeah.
my mindset in that moment is I'm ranting in my head and out loud, basically, about this idiot that I dealt with. This, and I'm going to keep saying it. This terrorist, because he literally was a terrorist. Like, I want to be terrorist. He wants to blow people up. That's what he said. Who impersonated a police officer as well. It's one of the reasons why he was under arrest. My mind's thinking about that. and about the what people are focusing on as well is that the assault part, like he assaulted the sergeant, or he assaulted me and another officer, and he abused us verbally for literally hours. And there are many colleagues out there who have had this. You ever do what we call a griefy constant watch, where you have someone literally gunning you for 9 hours straight, right? We basically had this for 9 hours after being assaulted. And my mindset in this pub the next day, I'm still there. I'm still thinking about that. I'm still thinking about how, I'll be honest, about how hard done by I was to have to deal with that for that long. And there's no support around. We call it Up Hampshire. I think it's the same in the counties. Like there's no support around mental health for Up Hampshire or for anything really. I mean, you'd have to be assaulted at ABH level or higher to even begin to think about having the next day off or something like that.
You mentioned something else, Martin, and this was something I wanted to get your opinion on. The journalist asked, what's the worst demographic of people to deal with, like you said? And you said, I challenge you to look at custody list, how many Mohammeds are out there. Muslims hate us, they proper hate us. Islam is a serious problem, too scared to be called that and can't look after themselves. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so the first point about look at how many Mohammeds are on the custody list. Well, there was only one Mohammed, literally person called Mohammed, and I can't say more because obviously privacy and all the rest of it, but there was one literal person called Mohammed on the custody list who I was referring to, and that was the person, again, who assaulted me and who was a wannabe terrorist. That's what that's referring to. And I do believe that in that area that Islam is an issue. And I don't mean all Muslims, because obviously, again, now I know that I'm being interviewed, I can be specific. Whereas when I don't think I'm being interviewed and I think I'm talking to the entire population, it's a different story. So for me, like, not all Muslims are a problem. I've had many Muslims friends over the years. You cannot live in London without coming into contact with Muslims. There's nothing wrong with them whatsoever. They're more than welcome. But there is a subsection, which just like many other groups, that are a problem. And recognizing that it's a problem is important. I mean, now I can talk about this because I'm not in the job. But I think a few years ago when Morocco won the World Cup, we had a crapload of people who were identifying themselves as Muslims. Why, nobody knows, because it's got nothing to do with religion. But they were saying, I'm a Muslim, the country's gone, and we're taking it over. And that's what we've been told in the street in Trafalgar Square. On that night. And then we were having practically, I mean, I can't say the word riot, because apparently that causes the government to dole out insurance money. But it was effectively not far off a riot, right? There were people like literally throwing bricks at each other in the street and fireworks and the rest of it. And they were screaming that they were taking over the country. Now, that's not all Muslims. The vast majority of Muslims are totally fine. And like, again, we love them and they're our neighbors and there's no issue with them. But there are people who cause problems within that. It's the same thing with the right wing. You've got the BNP party who are now trying to infiltrate Reform and other places. The BNP are a problem. They're extreme racists. The same thing for other places. But in this context, I'm talking about the terrorist in custody that assaulted me the day before. So, of course, I'm going to talk about what I'm seeing in that moment as the big problem. The big problem for me in that moment is extremism, specifically extreme Islam, who wants to blow us all up. And I hate to say this, but I have to say it. It's ridiculously ironic to me that the day after this broadcast comes out, the whole thing gets flatlined on the BBC's news page because of an Islamic terrorist attack in Manchester. I mean, you can't make it up. I can't make it up.
I put a post on X about that. And I said, yesterday everyone was calling for cops. Rephrased, everybody was calling for cops to this, cops to that. And then there's a terrorist attack and everybody's fucking ringing them up asking for help. It's something like everybody wants to hate the police until they need them. And that's certainly something I have found. Trying to think how to word this. When it comes to certain groups, regardless of whether it's Islam, whether it's fundamental Christians, whether it's people from fucking, I don't know, wherever, I think if we want justice to be blind, as it's supposed to be, and we want to enforce the law equally amongst all people, we have to be able to look at certain demographics in society and say, from the evidence we have seen, from the evidence we have collected, there is a disproportionate population of this community that does X, Y, and Z. So long as it's not stereotypes and you go, well, all Muslims are X or all Romanians are this. If you look at the evidence in front of you, then you can collect that evidence and then you can deal with the problem. Just thinking out loud, when people make allegations of two-tier policing, this is what people are talking about. They're talking about the police seem to, on the courts and the justice system seems to, come down harder on people who talk against certain populations rather than the populations which, in their view, are committing these offences. Such things like grooming gangs, for example. The reason why the grooming gangs were allowed to go on for so long and still happens and to be able to fester as much as it has was because people were too scared to look like they're being branded as racist. The police, the Met, the other social services, the courts, everything else, say that they've learnt their lesson in relation to that. And they're not going to be afraid of appearing racist if what they're saying is correct. The very fact that you were hauled in because you have tried to point out, based off your experience in relation to religious fundamentalism and terrorism, that you see it more in this community, I think it's quite ironic. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, the fact that you have to say it is ridiculous, frankly. I mean, again, I want to make it quite clear. I don't agree with what that other officer said at the end. I think it was awful what he said. You just go and shoot all the Somalians, whatever nonsense he was saying. My family are actually an immigrant family. To say to go shoot all the immigrants, well, there goes my family, isn't it? Like what? Why people seem to conflate the idea that extremists are bad and extremists represent the entire group they're in is beyond me. I think it's obvious. I'm not railing here against the Westboro Baptist Church in America, who is a bunch of Christian lunatics, because they are not something that I'm dealing with in that moment. And again, in that moment at the pub, just to bring it back there, I'm dealing with this particular person. I'm quite confident if I'd been assaulted by a Christian fundamentalist, I'll be probably saying the same thing, except replace Islam with Christianity, because that's the situation that I was in. And obviously working in Westminster, you get to see all of these, you get to see all the protests. We're at the heart of everything. You see what happens when, again, I've already alluded to one incident where I was working when Morocco won the World Cup, and that was ridiculous. Like and it was, and I don't. It's going to be really odd to say this, but I don't mind people getting pissy on protests. It's that's the point of a protest, right? To cause us to be annoying. I find it annoying, but it's my job to deal with it, right? But when you come up to an officer and you say, your days are numbered, we're going to come and blow you all up, and we're going to take over the country, I mean, that's another thing entirely. It's one thing saying, oh, all cops are bad, all cops are racist. Another thing saying, oh, we're going to come and blow you all up. And that's the issue that I had. And I'm being rather explicit in that because that's what I was thinking about at the pub. and I completely agree with your comments around extremism.
So basically what you're saying is context is very fucking important, and clipping anything out of context will make things look a certain way. And do you think that the BBC represented you fairly?
No, I mean, I tell you what broke my heart, and what really broke my heart was when they put on that, was it 10-second clip of the officer in the custody suite putting his arm around the detainee? I can't tell you how many times I've done that.
If that.
I can't tell you.
Mate.
It was less than that, wasn't it? It was really, really short. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been that officer. I was lost for words, absolutely lost for words. And the fact that that Rory knew that I'd been assaulted by this guy in custody the day before. We had a black screen, which was about 2 seconds on the screen, which said, this detainee assaulted 2 officers. I wasn't mentioned as being assaulted, even though I'm in the fucking program. And they're trying to make it out that I'm the evil racist prick. No context was added around it. I'm literally, I'm gonna do the whole Crimea River thing. Like, I'm literally a victim. And this is not conjecture. I'm a recorded victim on police systems and in the courts of that suspect. So the illusion here is that if you're a victim of someone assaulting you, and sorry for the strong language, but if you then call them a cunt the next day, are you evil? That's what we're dealing with here. And just to put a bit more context, just to continue some more behind the scenes stuff. My hearing, they accepted all the context around my defence. So they obviously there's no disputing the fact that I was assaulted or a victim. The assertion basically was that you can't say that you joined the job to have legal fucking scraps, which is what I said. And that's another thing which I find ridiculous, but anyway. And B, everything that I said, even if it was in relation to that suspect in custody, it's still all Islamophobic. That's basically what happened at the hearing. So even if you've been assaulted as an officer by a person and you're in your private home, at home, in peace and quiet, and you say, God, that guy was a cunt, well, you lost a job. And that's where we're at.
Do you think anybody who was featured in that documentary, regardless of any kind of context which was given at any hearing, do you reckon that they had already made their mind up prior to the officer actually giving their testimony? Because it makes the force look like they're doing the right thing if they get rid of those people in order, like I said, to make the force look better. Or do you think it was actually a fair hearing when it came to disciplinaries of the officers?
Jay, frankly, that's not even a question, mate. Like, it was a kangaroo court from the start. We knew we were getting sacked. Like, I mean, I don't know the other two officers at all. Like, it was the sergeant, the sexist idiot and the racist idiot at the end. The sexist sergeant and the racist idiot at the end. I don't know them, but I was told that I'm getting sacked, and I was told 3 or 4 weeks beforehand. So, like, basically at the start, within a matter of days, I was told, well, you're losing your job over this. I can't talk too much about it, but from what I understand, everybody who, I will say this because I can, everybody who has been sacked would have known they were being sacked already. They knew that there was that they weren't getting anywhere. It was a kangaroo court, and there's no question about it. I had, I don't even want to go into the rankings or anything, but I had a person who I knew very closely in the police come with me to the hearing because he wanted to be there. He was absolutely outraged at the proceedings, and he said even if what they said was legitimate, the proceedings and the way it was done and all the rest of it was unbelievable. It was literally a kangaroo court. So yeah, it's not even a question, Jay. They knew that we were getting sacked probably before the thing even aired on TV.
A big thing for me, Martin, with the entire documentary was we know everything what happens with in custody, the good, the bad, the ugly. Out of 7 months of covert recording, working 4 to 5 shifts a week, 12-hour shifts, coming into contact with probably hundreds of people through custody, hundreds of different officers, 100 different professionals. You're telling me that they could only find 6 or 7 officers out of that entire workforce that clipped a certain way, made them look bad? Granted, we know that there were particular officers who, even outside of context, what they did and what they said still not okay, and those officers quite rightly needed to be held into account. I think that's actually not a bad reflection on the overall police service, the police force of the Met, that if it was just 1 hour, I mean, don't get me wrong, if it was a 5-part documentary series of all different cops, then yeah, you can say that we have a serious fucking problem here. But like you said, out of that entire hour, they only showed a minimal couple of second clip of an officer putting their arm around a detainee to make sure they're okay. We did not see any good work, which there would have been every single day. We did not see the professionalism. We did not see the countless of positive interactions which that reporter would have had with everyday officers who go to work and do their absolute best against fucking infinite odds, and the deck is heavily stacked against police these days for a number of things what we said.
Because most of the footage is from officers who were on duty. You have to remember that. So most of the footage that they would have recorded, him being, covertly videoing people, would have been on duty in custody. Nothing. I don't think anything in that was actually with, other than the allegation that there was excessive use of force. There's nothing else there to show that officers were unprofessional towards a suspect or a victim directly. I mean, there is an argument that could be said about the custody sergeant and his comments, but the fact of the matter is, and this is going to offend people, but my problem with the custody sergeant was him putting on the klaxon call to go down to speak to the suspect. That was disgusting. But the comments around him not remanding the person. Now, if you're a police officer, you know very well that the MG7, the remand application, is made by the officer in charge of that case. It's down to them to prove to the custody sergeant that that person requires remanding. Now, I don't know what that remand application said, and neither do you, and neither does anyone, right? We only have the comment, the flippant comment that the custody sergeant made about it. I think it was something like there was marks on her belly, and how could this person not have kicked them? Well, you don't know that. You don't. You have, maybe the mark was drawn in crayon by a child, and that person then said it was someone who kicked them. The fact is, we have to take it at face value and believe it immediately, and I completely agree with that position. But when you're talking about remanding someone, there's a very set of criteria. Personally, I have to admit, if I was in that position, I would have just remanded him anyway. But that's just me. I'm a bit of a, I'm a bit like that. No one would have cried a tear. I can tell you that.
But just on that, Martin, the chief constable who they brought in to comment on the case, made a comment, and it really fucking annoyed me. It's people like, it was something like, this custody sergeant, their attitude is why domestic violence and rape cases don't get charged. No, that's not the case. There's a
Remand application
myriad
in
of,
custody has got nothing to do with that.
yeah, and it's not the police who make that decision to remand a case like that. It's the Crown Prosecution Service.
Exactly. Yeah,
The
exactly.
Crown Prosecution Service will only, even if you get to a remand status where the risk is so high that this person it cannot be released and must go to court the next day for safeguarding or flight risk or whatever. And as an acting chief constable, this person should have known all of that, but instead what they wanted to do was they wanted to blame this custody sergeant. I'm not defending the sergeant's comments. I didn't think they were okay.
I agree with you. But the process around it, I mean, you're a police officer, you know the process. There is a process there. And if you want to shit on the process, then fine. But that's got nothing to do with, him making decisions to remand or not. That's based on another set of criteria. His comments were ridiculous, especially with the klaxon call. My God.
I could turn around and I could look at a case and go, I don't believe a single word this person's saying, but I need to send it to the Crown Prosecution Service anyway. And the CPS look at the evidence and go, all right, yeah, we're going to remand them. But equally,
that happens hourly in the police.
Well, mate, what I've done countless times is I've fucking put a case to the CPS and gone, if we release this guy, I'm going to be coming to you with a homicide next. And they've gone, yeah, well, we think he'll be all right on bail. It's like, right, it's not that sergeant's fault and the attitude of that sergeant's fault why there is violence against women and girls, or why there's rape cases and sexual assault cases not being investigated. It's a much bigger, much more complicated thing than that. And I found the comments from that apparently, very experienced police officer just ignorant and really just abhorrent, to be honest.
I mean, I can sidetrack from that just a little bit, if you don't mind. I have a good news story of one of my cases that I dealt with years ago. And this is about rape and sexual abuse. So this is a good news story from the police. So I dealt with a woman who had a big bruise on the right side of her neck. And she wanted to talk to us about the bruise. And the whole conversation was about that. And to cut a long story short, I managed to drag out of her through a lot of talking. And she wouldn't talk to other officers. She'd only talk to me. That she had effectively been raped. I'm cutting a long story short, because getting that out of her was a my God, that was a deal where I tell you that. But it turns out I had a massive argument with Sapphire, which is the sexual offences unit in the Met, to come down in person, because they don't have anyone left either. When they came down, they took her clothes off, with her permission, obviously, just to be clear for public. They took her clothes off in a private room, and when they came out, they were white as a ghost. And they said to me, that bruise on her neck continues all the way down to her genitalia. And this person, this disgusting person, had ABH'd this female and raped her at the same time, and it was one of the most horrific things ever. And again, another proud moment for me, because if it weren't for me, that guy would be walking free. He's in prison right now. But that's a good news story for the Met. We do take it seriously. There are officers on the ground that take it seriously. We care about these things. The problem is with rape cases, and what people, I think the public forget, is that it's really fucking hard to prove a rape case. It's really hard to prove a rape case. If you've got someone who said that I'm regularly having sex with my partner, but this one time I said no, therefore they raped me. Absolutely, that's right. That's rape, right? And it should be taken absolutely seriously. But how the hell can I prove that? Unless you've got some kind of video or text evidence or some other form of evidence, your body, as we know as police officers, your body is a crime scene, right? Well, it's not really useful to me, because if you've had sex on prior occasions, if he turns around and said she consented, then what do I have? I can't prosecute someone on that alone. Do you know what I mean? It's much harder for the police than people realise to prove these things.
In an ideal world, if someone is seriously sexually assaulted, they would go to prison. The perpetrator would go to prison. That is what every cop wants. Every detective who locks up someone for domestic assault or who investigates a serious sexual assault. And I know officers that work, and they work really closely, and very, very good detectives who work really closely with really nasty victims. Yeah, but the courts, for whatever reason, even a lot of the time when it seems like the evidence is 100% nailed on, they will say no, because they've got their own statistical quotas and everything else to hit, so they don't want to charge a case which then falls through because it goes against them.
Yep.
But on that, in particular, when it comes to serious sexual assault, on that vein, I can understand people's absolute discontent in why the cases don't get charged, and I've had conversations with activist groups and pressure groups in relation to this, and but they only see the stat. They only see the police don't take sexual assault seriously.
Yeah.
It's like, well, the police are the one who get all the blame. If the police do everything what they are supposed to do and they arrest and they do all the evidence kits and everything else, the police weren't there. Often with these cases, there's two people in that room, and even if they say yes, we both did have sex, but one person says they didn't consent, the other person says they did. How do we prove?
Exactly.
Because we know people make malicious allegations. We know people lie. We know that people make, if we talk about domestic violence, if a male is a victim of domestic violence from a female, we know that malicious allegations of sexual assault and rape are used as a control tactic. So that's why we can't just believe somebody if they say it. There has to be evidence and proof, otherwise innocent people will be sent to prison. And that is difficult. The police have an incredibly difficult job. And what I don't like is when I hear people screaming on the news or screaming at cops saying you don't do enough. It's like, listen, they do a fucking impossible job. And when it goes well, you don't hear about it. And when it falls through, the police are to blame. So,
but Jay, who is really to blame? I think the people who are really to blame is the senior leadership teams. All of this stuff is from senior leadership. Like all of the issues around sexual offences, that it's because they're completely out of touch. It's like, again, going back to the documentary, that ex is chief constable from, I think it was Dorset. She's probably not done frontline policing in 20 years. Right? You go look at Commissioner Mark Rowley's Wikipedia page and see when he was last a frontline officer. The vast majority of these so-called police officers at the top of the food chain haven't done any real police work in donkey's years. And they're out of touch, frankly. And there are SLT who are amazing. I've met them, right? And they're super down to earth. But there are far more who are completely out of touch. Their career, what you might call a career cop, who straight out of their probation immediately started the chain to become a sergeant and so on. And they're the problem. And I don't know how to fix it, because you can't just uproot the entirety of SLT and replace it tomorrow. It's very difficult to fix.
I think one thing that needs to happen is senior leadership team. Basically, if you've got a warrant card, you still have to go out, whether that's once a month or once a week or whatever.
For 2 hours and then go back in the office. That's what they normally do.
No, man, do a full shift. You get crewed up with somebody, or you go out on your own or whatever. I mean, not on your own. I'm against single crewing, but you get crewed up with somebody. To be fair, my old superintendent, I've got my opinions about them, but they still went out. They still strapped up their stab vest, and because they didn't want to lose touch with what was happening on the front line. And I think if more officers did that, if more chief supers, assistant chief constables, even a chief constable went out and they still were a cop and they went speaking to the public and they saw what was happening on the front line, then things I think would be irrevocably different, would be massively different, because they would actually see the things what happen. Because what happens right now is a senior leader will go around and they'll say, what are the problems? The officers on the ground who experience all the problems in the sergeants will be told probably to shut the fuck up and not say anything, because it'll make all the other middle management look bad if it gets fed through to them. But anyway, we digress. So we're nearly at the end now, Martin, and I've taken enough of your time, and I really appreciate you coming on and being able to express your side of this story, which you haven't been able to. So in relation to this, what impact has this BBC documentary had on you?
It's frankly destroyed my life, to put it in short. I mean, I'm quite a staunch person. The first few weeks was awful. I came to terms that I was coming out of the police, and that was the end of my career. As I've already mentioned, I think at the beginning, like the black stain is going to follow me. It's going to be impossible for me to get any real work. I've already seen that. It's going to take, I don't know how long. I don't know what the next chapter in my story is, because I need to provide for family. I've got rent to pay. I've got bills to pay. I feel like I did 6 years in the police. I can tell you now, and I've already been asked this before, would you not join the police if you knew this was the outcome? The answer is I would still join the police, even if I knew this was the outcome, because as I've already alluded to, there are people who are alive today that are alive because of my actions. And I don't just mean if you plonked another officer in my position, they would do the same. No, they are alive because of my unique action. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't in good conscience say that I wouldn't join, because I know those people wouldn't be here. So I would do it all again, and it was worth it was worth everything, and I've given everything. It's destroyed my mental health. It's destroyed my career prospects, and it's destroyed my reputation. But I'd do it all again. That's the simple answer.
And you know what, Martin? That's a hell of a thing to say. That's a hell of a thing to say. And what I liked as well is that you're not saying that if an officer, someone just got your collar number, you didn't get in, but someone else did, these that same things would happen because of your unique skill set. From what you're saying is you were very, very good at your job. There are plenty of people who are alive as a result of what you've done. Things which, we never hear about that. We never hear about the times when an officer saved someone's life or an officer found a missing child or, like you said at the start, an officer who managed to stop somebody from taking their lives seconds before it happened. We don't hear about that. All we see is in the media, not just necessarily on the BBC, but in the media is cops done this cop's been sacked for this, paints a picture that all police are scumbags. And what does that do to the morale of the police? Well, we don't get commended when we do something well. And if we do fuck up or something does come out, we get our absolute careers destroyed and potential future careers destroyed. And to all the other officers out there who, are doing really good work, they may get clips out of context. It makes everybody in the force believe that the public hate them when that isn't the case. So it's no wonder. I think it's ironic that the people who make these documentaries and make these pieces and make these comments online are only able to do so because the very people they're criticizing make sure that they're safe and they can actually do that. My fear is that one day, because people like to kick the police and people like to shit all over the police, is that one day when you actually ring 999 for their help, there won't be any left. There won't be anyone to come to help you.
We're getting there. I'd say that. We're getting there already, Jay.
Just to finish on then, Martin, the message what was put forward in that documentary is that the Metropolitan Police is institutionally racist, sexist and misogynist. Do you think that is the case?
Absolutely not, no. I don't think it's institutionally. There are idiots in the police. We've already seen 2 of them in that documentary, at least. Of course, they're idiots. The thing is, you have to factor in that there's, 30-something thousand police officers in the Met. The fact, how are you going to get 30,000, for want of a better word, angels? You're going to get people from all walks of life, some who are going to have opinions that you don't like. And the problem that you have to ask yourself is, the police are supposed to be the people. We're not like American police. We're not like an army. We're supposed to be the public. If you're going to have police represent the public, then you're going to have police officers with controversial views that you don't like. For example, if you're a left-leaning person, you're going to have police officers who support reform and vice versa. And you might not like that, but that's how it works, and people have to recognize that. And another thing people have to recognize while I'm at it is that police are human. Police are human, and I think the issues that what I would be really, really angry at is if the BBC had done a documentary and it had shown officers discriminating against suspects or victims directly and at scene or in uniform. For example, let's just take, I use myself as an example. Let's just say I went to a call and it was a Muslim person who had been assaulted, and I said, "Oh, you can fuck off." And then afterwards I made a flippant comment, "Oh yeah, he can fuck off because he's a Muslim." Yeah. That's disgusting.
Well, that is racist.
That is exactly wrong. It's disgusting, right? And if that was the case, like I would have deserved everything I got and more, in fact, right? But the fact of the matter is, that's not how it went down. And the vast majority of this footage that you've seen, as you can see, is all officers talking in private and in their own time and basically offloading. Like I said, I don't agree with the sergeant and the other person, but there are many other officers in that documentary. A couple of them I do know that are amazing officers, and I really mean that. Like if this person came to your house and you was in trouble, like you would like it almost makes me tear up thinking about it, thinking that they would be rejected based on this. As far as I'm aware, I think that everybody in that documentary who has had their face shown is probably on the way out, and that's the way it is. Yeah, I mean, the Met to sort of steel man the Met, they're in between a rock and a hard place if you think about it. If they don't sack everybody there, they're all racist and horrible. If they do sack everybody there, they're all unfair, but they're unfair to the police officers. And who has no voice? Police officers have no voice because we can't strike, right? But who does have a voice? Well, the public has a voice. So who would you rather piss off more? You'd rather piss off your own police officers. They're all going to leave in 3 years anyway. That's what they call it now. The healthy churn is what they refer to it as. Police officers. I don't know if you've heard of this, but SLT, I've heard it myself internally, would say that they use the term the healthy churn, aka police officers will come on board for 3 or 4 years and then leave, which is great for the Met because that means they're not on top whack pay. The amount of money they put into their training has been paid off, and they get a new set of officers to replace them. So you don't have a bunch of officers who are 20 years in on top whack pay and who are not motivated anymore because they're all sick of the bullshit. Yeah.
The people who suffer are the public who don't get an experienced police
Exactly.
officer turn up to their address to help them.
Exactly. Who do you think's replaced me? I've been doing the job for 6 years. Even I'm not technically I'm not an old sweat, but the like on my team, I'm like what above average like service. There's like 2 people on my team that is over 15 years at best. I think even 1 actually. No, 2. Sorry, there's 2 people on my team that's over 15 years service. Right? Who's replaced me? Well, probably some probationer on this horrible university intake program, which everybody, including the people doing it, agree is terrible.
Yeah. I'm not going to go on about the university degree. People on my channel are sick of me fucking talking about the university degree.
I'm not surprised, mate. Yeah, not surprised.
What message do you have to people who've watched that documentary who perhaps have a certain view of the Met now?
Believe what you see, but understand that you're not seeing the full context. You're not seeing everything, and you're certainly not seeing all the good work that happens on a daily basis. There are sets that I've gone to work and are set to be for the uninitiated is 6 days. Yeah. Out of those 6 days, you could say that officers have done some incredible stuff that are either life-saving or putting very high harm offenders away, including people who commit sexual abuse, rape, very strong, hard assaults. And they do this on a daily basis without a blink of an eye. And then they go from that to the shoplifter, or to sort out your neighborhood dispute, or to stop your shouting, or come into your house because you're shouting over a remote. And just before that, they've gone to a child who's died. I've literally done that. I've had a 4-year-old who somehow had a heart attack and died, and I've sat in hospital with that kid. And then straight after that, I've gone to a neighborhood dispute. I mean, bear that in mind, and that's all I'd say.
It's awful. And Martin, what final message would you have to the BBC?
Go back to proper reporting. Excuse me. Go back to proper reporting. Go back to the old 80s, 90s style BBC who had integrity, who cared. Before this happened, I genuinely thought something like Panorama had some kind of integrity. I didn't know how bad it's got because I haven't watched them in years. But like there's no integrity whatsoever. Where is the integrity? If that sergeant had committed excessive use of force, who else has he assaulted in the 6 months since you sat on the video so you can broadcast it and obtain views? Why didn't you tell the Met and tell them to keep it quiet until you aired the program? What are you doing? There's no moral compass. It's all about the clicks, the views, the money. Go back to old school reporting. The public pay for you. If you don't want to do that, then go to advertising and stop making the public pay your shitty TV license. Excuse my French.
Powerful message, and I think a lot of people would echo that same sentiment. I've got my own views about the BBC. But I don't think this was their best program at all. And even just, obviously I'm emotionally invested because you could have quite easily been one of my colleagues if I'd have started somewhere, if I'd have joined somewhere else. That could have easily happened to people who I know. So there is that emotional investment there as well. But even just subjectively looking at it, anyone who has any kind of idea how the media works, I would like to think would look at that documentary and go, we're not getting the full picture here. And like I said earlier, it's all to do with money, clicks, attention, and the BBC are a business essentially, so they're going to create the most incendiary kind of footage they can. And I guess in relation to myself, my own parting message would be just thanks to all the cops who turn up every day and do their absolute best with the deck stacked against them. And honestly, if out of 7 months of filming, covert recording, you could only find an hour of footage, and not even the full hour was the footage. Some of it was interviews with the people. That's actually not that bad when you think about it in general. I'm happy that if there are certain people in the organization who shouldn't have been in, that they are no longer in there, then that's good. But we can't tar everybody with the same brush in order to create a sensationalized piece of air quotes journalism just to make money and to become relevant again. But Martin, thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, Jamie.
You've been awesome. And thank you everyone for joining. Make sure you like and subscribe.